So Maryam and Fatima walk into the masjid. They pass the grand French doors that lead into the men's section and make their way around the corner, past the dumpster and up into the attic, also known as the women's section. It's Jummah time, so they're there for the khutbah, and they see the wall in front of them as they are barred off by 4 walls. There's a little screen at the top where they can see the imam saying his speech. Maryam is trying really hard to concentrate, but it's a little bit difficult with the women chatting in the background, the other women shushing them, and the children running around and screaming. Nonetheless, they get done with the khutbah, and the prayer begins, and no sooner does Maryam fall into sujood that she realizes that her sajda has been lasting for a bit too long. She's about in the double digits with her Subhana Rabbiyal A'la when she finally hears the takbir, and she stands up for the next rak'ah, only to find that Fatima is in ruku and the other woman next to her is in sujood. A panic breaks out. Everyone's looking to the side. They're not sure if their prayer really counts anymore. And then finally, the speaker goes back on and we hear, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Unfortunately, this is not an uncommon occurrence in the women's section of the masajid. If this were something that were to happen in the men's section, this would be intolerable. However, women have become complacent with the barriers that have been set up in the masjid that they have. Okay, so the debate for the masjid barrier has been going on for a long time now, and we got people on all sides of this platform. Men and women who are against it, and men and women who are for it, and shuyukh who are for it and against it. But what we really need to go to is the root issue. We need to look at the time of our Prophet ﷺ. In fact, after talking to various shuyukh and doing some research, I came to find that there was no physical barrier in the masjid of Rasulullah ﷺ. And there's plenty of authentic ahadith to back this up, including the fact that the women were asked in sujood to wait before they come up so that they do not see the aura of the men in front of them, clearly showing that they were in close vicinity to the men, that they could see the men, and that they were in one musalla. The only restriction was that men were told to go at the front of the musalla, and the women were told to go at the back. Okay, so people would say that was the time of the Sahaba, and they are the cream of the crop. They are a cut above the rest. We're not like them. We've got a really messed up society. We need the barriers. But I would beg to ask, were not the Sahaba also sons and daughters of Adam? Did they not sin as well? There was an account where a man had come to the Prophet ﷺ to confess that he had committed zina. And there was more than one case of that. So truly the temptations and the ills of society that we bear today were at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Yet he did not feel the need to erect a barrier to be able to create create a better moral society. All right, so we didn't have the barriers at one point, but we have them now. So what happened? A little bit of a history lesson. As is common in Islamic history, women were given rights at the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, but as time went on, things kind of got sour and got bad. Patriarchal traditions started leaking their way into Muslim governments and Muslim countries, and soon enough, not only were barriers put in masajid, but women were even barred from the masjid themselves. There's even certain Muslim countries where you will see that Muslim women are still not allowed into the masajid. However, we have made some success, we have made some progress, and women have now started to be allowed into the masajid, but with limited access. I wanted you to take a look at some of the barriers that we have in the masajid today. This first one is what I like to call the afterthought. So this is where you had originally had a male-only musalla, and then they used the attic or the basement or sometimes the closet underneath the stairway to give the women a section. They have no access to the men, no access to the imam. Only thing that is giving them access is an audio system, and we all know how reliable those are. Then there's the next type, which I like to call the separate but equal, similar to what we had in America not too long ago. So women, perhaps they're in the same room as a man, but they are barred from from seeing the men from a wall, a physical wall, or even some boards, or even we have sometimes a curtain. We'll have this, I call this a sick joke because this is supposed to be glass, but so, we're supposed to see them, but we really can't see a single thing. And then there's the one-way mirror where we can see the imam, but the imam can't see us. So these all have, they are progress. We are in the same place as the men. However, at times, for example, like with the curtain and the boards, the women can't even see the men. Perhaps they can hear them. They can have a little sense that they're in the same room. But the main important factor is that the imam cannot see the women, and we'll talk about that later. Then this is the next one. This is an example of that. The next one I like to call the first row seats. So nowadays we've been having masajid where Muslim women are on the top row and the men are on the bottom. And you think, oh great, I can see everything, but really only the first row of women can see anything. Everyone else has to fend for themselves. And the most uncommon and unfortunately uncommon situation we see is that, like I like to call the sunnah style, where the men are in the front, the women are in the back, and there is no partition in between. Okay, so what's the big deal about the barrier? Why is it such a big issue? I went around the community and asked some men and women, and I got some responses. In fact, it is true that some women, a good number of women, do like the barrier. It gives them some privacy. They're able to take a nap in the masjid without men seeing. They're able to nurse their children. They're able to just relax. And men, similarly, they feel like perhaps when they're praying, when they're coming to the masjid, this is the one time that they don't want to be distracted by women. Okay, fair enough. But let's take a look at the cons. The technical difficulties, like we mentioned earlier, are one of the factors that has made many a woman lose many a prayer. I can say that I can count at least a dozen instances in the past couple of months where the mic system has gone off and every woman in that room doesn't even know which part of the prayer she's in, let alone does she know if her prayer counts anymore. Also, in regards to technical issues, when you put women behind a barrier and all they can do is hear the imam or look at the imam on a TV screen, it is no different from her watching a YouTube video or listening to a CD. So why blame the women when they start talking? Why blame the kids when they start screaming? There's no authority in front of them. There's no imam in front of them to admonish the women or at least tell them the etiquette of the khutbah. There are so many women till this day that don't know they're not supposed to talk in a khutbah. Why? Because they don't even have access to the imam who would have told them that. Another huge important factor is that a woman cannot really be fully engaged in her community if she is behind a barrier. For example, if an imam is giving a speech after salah and the men can ask questions, they just raise their hand. The woman, perhaps she can write something on the note card and throw it over the barrier and hope it makes it somewhere. If the imam is asking for volunteers for certain subcommittees, the men raise their hands, they sign up for the sheets, and I've experienced this just very recently. The women are sitting there wondering, are we going to be able to volunteer? How are you supposed to have women on a subcommittee to tell you that they don't want this barrier if they can't even raise their hand to be a part of that subcommittee? And most importantly, perhaps, is that when the imam cannot see a huge portion, a huge demographic of his congregation, how is he supposed to know the problems of the women? How is he supposed to cater to their needs? How is he supposed to address this entire population of people when we decide to put them behind a barrier, hide them, and say that they pretty much don't exist? Okay, so perhaps we cannot take leaps right now. Maybe we're not ready to go back into the sunnah style, but maybe we can take baby steps. Here is an example of a masjid that I visited. It's called ISNA Canada. It's in Ontario. And it's got a symbolic barrier. It's about 2.5 feet. The women and men are in the same musalla. You can see the imam can see you. And to the side, where you can't see in the picture, there are 2 extra rooms covered up where women who feel more comfortable can be behind a barrier. At the end of the day, it's about choice. Here's another similar. I've seen something similar to this when I when I went to the University of Texas at Austin when I recently visited. I saw a very beautiful piece of paper. It's the Nueces Masjid. It's a very tiny musalla, and the men and women are separated by a curtain. But the beautiful paper that I saw was the one that is sitting on top of the curtain, which reads, "Curtain placement at discretion of women." At the end of the day, perhaps the answer is not barrier or no barrier. Perhaps the answer is us realizing that Islam gave women the right to be a part of their masjid, to be a part of their community without a barrier. So it is time that we start giving women the right to choose whether they want a barrier or not. Jazakallahu khair.